Hey, hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Chastity. Here we talk about beauty, entertainment, celebrities, books, movies, animes, and kind of anything else that garners my attention this week. And today we will be talking about the new Netflix original movie, Things Heard and Seen. Now, this video is going to be split into like two parts. There is going to be like me talking about different points of the movie, kind of summarizing, giving my thoughts and opinion. There is a mini rant attached to that. And then the second half of the video, the movie opens up with a quote, which I will talk about in that portion of the video. And actually, usually when movies and stuff start with a quote, it's usually, sometimes not always, integral to different plots and themes in the movie. So I usually do my research on that. And this time when I did that, I was able to, while researching, kind of see how the quote, well, the author of the quote, or the person that said it, relates back to the movie itself. And I think that's a really interesting thing and really good job from the writers and director standpoint. So I had a really fun time researching that and geeking out about it. So if you are also a person that likes history and you're a little nerdy like I am, look forward to the second half of this video. Also, like all of my review videos, they're spoilers. I'm sorry, I simply cannot be vague about anything. If I'm talking about something, I'm talking about something. So I definitely feel like you guys should check this movie out before you watch this video. It's 2 hours long, and honestly, low key, it could have been a little bit longer in my opinion, which is weird because usually I don't like movies that are longer than an hour, 50 minutes. I feel like after that it gets real stretchy, but I think there was so much in this movie that it could have did with maybe 10, 15 more minutes. The movie opens up and we meet Catherine and George Claire, who are celebrating their daughter Franny's 4th birthday. Here at the birthday party, we find out that Catherine actually has an eating disorder, which we'll later find out is linked to George and his very misogynistic and disgusting views on women's bodies. He has a lot to say and is very judgmental. We get a sense of this when he is talking about another woman and the way that she ate, and we can definitely see how he is speaking about that really does affect Catherine. So we can assume that a lot of her purging is based on George and wanting to look good for him and be beautiful in his eyes. We also find out during the sequence that George has actually been given a job in upstate New York at a small university teaching, and is now causing the whole family to pack up and move to this super tiny town in upstate New York, which bothers me and also bothers Catherine's friend, because her friend's like, girl, you have a job and career here and you're just gonna leave. And she's like, well, this is such a great opportunity for George and he sacrificed so much for me. No, he hasn't. No, he hasn't. Let's stop acting like men be sacrificing shit, because they don't. Because she said this and then gave us no examples of when George has sacrificed anything. So I'm supposed to just take your word for it? Ma'am, okay. So George is forcing the whole family to move upstate New York for this job in a small college. Now, they're moving to this town and we meet the woman that is selling the home. And as we're walking around the house, they're talking, we get the sense that there is something wrong with this house. We're not quite sure what it is, but it does feel very foreboding. You can tell that the woman selling the house is kind of holding back some things. We're not quite sure what it is, but we can definitely feel it. The house just feels a little bad. Within the first week of them moving in there, we meet two young boys, Eddie and Cole, who offer to help take care of the home, do the cropping, the farming, stuff like that. Cause it's a decent size, lot of property. Definitely farmland. You could definitely tell that their closest neighbor is probably a mile away. So there's a lot of acres to take care of. And these two young boys have offered to help with the maintaining of the property, as well as Cole is one of the best babysitters in the area, and he's offering to help babysit Franny when Claire and George needs it. Also, while we're getting into the scene, you can tell there is some slight tension between the older brother Eddie and Catherine, which I was completely rooting for once. Okay, we get the scene with George and Franny at the library. This is where he meets a young girl. I'm not quite how old she is. I know she's of a legal age, but I don't know if she's in her 20s. Her name is Willis. She's a local girl. George meets her and immediately gets to flirting. I think because this scene was before the Eddie scene, whatever. So like this happens where he's like he's like leaned up against a wall, looking real sleazy. You know, because she had this book in her hand, and he was like, "Ooh, I know the artist of that." Da, da. And he's trying to flirt with her, and it's so obvious, so obvious. And the librarian, she peeps down what's happening, and she saves that for later, and she will come back to the story much later. She's not important, but she's also very important. So while looking back at the video, I never brought back the librarian, so here I am now. So Catherine goes to return some books from the library, her books and some of her husband's books. One of the books has the name Willis in it, and she's like, "Oh, that's weird." And the librarian's like, "You know, that's like an androgynous name. Like men and women can have the name Willis. There's actually a girl in town whose name is Willis." And then Catherine's daughter Franny pipes up and it's like, "Yeah, that's Daddy's friend." And you get this look of realization on Catherine's face. I'm like, "I know that's right, sis. You see something wrong? Because I see something wrong here." But we have George here flirting with some, like, haven't even been in town 2 weeks. Already flirting with some local girl. Which is why when I saw Eddie and Catherine's, like, chemistry, I was like, please cheat, Catherine. If he's gonna cheat, at least you get some too. Going back to Eddie and Cole, much later in the story, Catherine unfortunately finds out that this actually used to be Eddie and Cole's home before the murder-suicide of their parents. So what happened was Eddie and Cole's father, I think his name was Calvin, had fell on hard times. The farm wasn't making much money. He wasn't making much money. So he goes and shoots all of their cows, gives the whole family sedatives, and then goes down to the garage, closing all the windows, turning on the ignition, and letting the fumes suffocate the family. This is actually important because on the first night of Catherine and George and Franny moving in, the garage is actually under the bedroom. And when Catherine's in the bedroom, she can smell this kind of like gasoline type of smell. What emissions do cars emit? Whatever those emissions are, she can smell them in the room. And this is important because this is like a horror movie and stuff like that. Was I supposed to say that in the beginning? It's a horror movie, girl. So after George meets Willis for the first time, he is obsessed with her. He actually ends up having an affair, which, I can't say something. The suspense of belief I had to do in this movie, because the actor that plays George, in my opinion, is not attractive, even for white men standards. There is nothing to make me believe, because there's a scene where he is teaching at the university and you have all the girls in class like swooning at him, and I'm just like, this man look 40, look 40, 50 years old. Like there is nothing sexy about George. There is no, I personally do not get this, and I don't get Willis's like attraction to him. Well, we find out that like her father was a bad man, and so she's also attracted to bad men. So maybe she could just sense that George is actually hot garbage, and maybe that's her attraction to him. But yeah, it was very hard for me to kind of get through some of these parts of the movie just because I was like, George is not attractive. George is not attractive at all. Here's where the rant comes in. There is something purposely manipulative to making your wife quit her job, quit her career, separate her from her friends and her family and the people who are her support system, move her to a small, tiny town where she knows absolutely nobody, and her only connection to adult conversation is you, because she's left home all day with this 4-year-old while you go off, have a job, have a career, and then cheat on her? Really? right now. You have to do that right now. Sorry, my neighbor, irritating. But the purposefulness of isolating her and keeping her all alone and then cheating is manipulation. Because now she's not going to want to leave. She's alone. She's by herself. You are the only person she has right now. Because yes, you can call your family and friends, but it is not the same as physically being with somebody and physically having that type of connection. And she tells us how lonely she is being here and how she wants to have friends. And she's watching George have a social life and she's stuck in the house. And he's cheating on her. Like, this is on purpose. And this is what some men do. You isolate women so you can do whatever you want to them because you know they can't leave you. You've created hopelessness for them. You are their only thing they have. You're their only support system. So they can't leave you. George is a piece of shit. Like, George is actually a horrible human being, and men like him are horrible. Because again, making her quit her job, give up her hopes and dreams for yours, because she's the dutiful wife. That's what wives are supposed to do. And then he really was not trying to get her integrated into the town. She was trying to do that all by herself. When he should have been having work dinners and inviting people over and getting Catherine some friends, but he wasn't. Because he wanted to cheat. He wanted to keep her alone. And you can't tell me he wasn't trying to do that. Because all of this was just far too calculated for that not to be the case. George does end up introducing Catherine to one of his colleagues. Her name is Justine, and her husband. They meet, and her and Catherine hit it off. Catherine confides a lot into Justine. We find out that Catherine actually ended up getting pregnant before they got married, and George did the right thing, as her mother said, and married her, and that their first 4 years of marriage was kind of a whirlwind because they really didn't get the chance to be newlyweds because they had Franny. And I 100% feel like Catherine regrets it. Because I do feel like if Catherine never got pregnant, her and George probably never would have gotten married. Because there's just nothing about George that I see and I'm like, that is desirable. That is a man I want. George is very narcissistic. He's a terrible person. And there's just no redeeming qualities to George in my opinion. So while all of the main plot things are happening, Catherine and her daughter are seeing ghosts. In the daughter Franny's room, before the ghost appears, the light bulb in her room, it's like a clown light bulb, will flicker on and off, and then she will see the apparition, who is this woman, who will later find out name is Ella, and she's actually not the original, she is the last, she's the previous owner of this house, the one whose husband murdered her. For Catherine, she's seeing this orb-like figure moving past her, and that's actually how she finds this red ring that we later find out has much significance to the story and the women of this story and the women of these stories. Listen, at first Catherine said that she was very afraid of the ghost, but then later on she admits to Floyd, who is another one of George's colleagues, that she feels very comforted by the spirit. This ghost, I love her. I really enjoyed this ghost because she's petty. Okay, so the night that George and Catherine get introduced to Justine and her husband, they get into this big fight. Unfortunately, not about the cheating. And he actually ends up pushing her, and she ends up cutting her face. It's a whole lot of mess. Catherine gets back to the house. She goes to sleep in her daughter's room because she wants no parts of George that night. George comes into the room. He's like, I am so sorry. I didn't mean to. Oh, boo-hoo, boo-hoo. And as he's giving his sob story, we see the clown light bulb kind of start to flicker. And then when he tells her that he loves her The ghost makes the light bulb explode. Ghost said, "That is a lie, sir. You are a cheating piece of shit and you are lying to this woman." And I thought that was so funny. The comedic time. I don't think it was supposed to be funny, but to me it was comedic because him just saying, "I love you," and then the ghost being like, "That is incorrect. That is a lie. You do not love this woman." It tickles me, I'm not gonna hold you. There's another time where, okay, George is a lying piece of shit. So when they met in undergrad, she was under the impression that George was a painter. He had these paintings of like sailboats and like lighthouses, things like that. He said that was his paintings. We find out at, I think, Christmas dinner that is not the case. George had a cousin who went sailing and ended up dying at the age of 19, and then all of his paintings disappeared. Those are the paintings that George has been saying are his. Okay. So she finds out about this, and then she goes to the bathroom to purge. And he says, "You're back and doing this." She said, "I'm throwing up our marriage." Yeah. Yeah. And they're fighting and going back and forth, and the ghost just slams the door in his face and then locks it. I love this ghost. Another situation very early in the movie is when Catherine is actually on the scale weighing herself, and like you can tell it's all happening to her in that moment. The ghost turns on the toothbrush and actually makes it fall and break the scale. This ghost, who we are once we are, because I feel like we usually view ghosts as spirits as always malevolent, always bad, but you can very much so tell that this spirit is very protective over the women of this family. Again, we will later find out that the ghost is actually Ella, who was the wife of Calvin, who killed her. We find out George is a prolific liar, okay? Besides the cheating on his wife, he actually forged his recommendation for this job because to be a professor, you need a recommendation. And his professor was like, "Oh no, what?" And he forged the recommendation. We find out that he's, well, he's a killer. Okay, like, because Floyd finds out about the forged, letter recommendation, and he takes Floyd out on Floyd's boat and then drowns him. Now, the cousin, remember the one who died on their boat and then had all their art stolen? I think George killed him. I do. And then stole his art and his boat. Then Justine is also aware of the cheating because Justine weaves things and he asks her to make one for his mother. It was actually for Willis. She sees Willis, don't know why he thought that wasn't going to happen. It's a small town. And then she also is aware of something going on with his teaching credentials. He then runs her off the road, puts her in a coma. Now, while the ghost of Ella is kind of protecting, Catherine and Franny, there is another spirit in the house, her husband, Calvin, who is getting to George because George is an evil person and evil attracts evil and is whispering into his ear all of these crazy mess that like he's all by himself, he doesn't need anybody, the things, the man of things that help men create manifestos. Yeah, Calvin's giving him those talking points. Catherine believes that he definitely is the one that ran Justine off the road. So she packs bags and she's waiting to, once he gets home and go to sleep, to take Franny and go. He finds the suitcase and luggage. He gives the family sedatives like how Calvin did. And then he murders Catherine and tries to frame Eddie. Now, the scene where she is going to die, she's actually in her last few moments being kind of led to heaven by Ella. Ella is making her last moments as painless as possible, and we can see, like, as he's killing her, we don't see Catherine, we see Ella in her stead. Now, George tries to play it off like this is a robbery gone wrong. I don't really know how it could be a robbery gone wrong if they just killed her but stole nothing. Is the non-stealing part where the robbery went wrong? I have to assume. Also, again, they live in a very small town. Closest neighbor is a mile away. That is not an area with a lot of breaking entrance, all right? But that's what he said is what happened, and they don't really have much, evidence because, well, he lives there. So his fingerprints are everywhere, as well as Eddie's fingerprints that are also on the axe. But again, he was kind of like the groundskeeper, essentially. So, of course, his fingerprints are on it. But again, this is the 1980s. The cops are cops and they can't do their job. Well, I'm not going to give the cops too much because there really was no evidence because like Eddie was not willing to say that George was sleeping with Willis, to be like, there is some issues going on in this family. You know, everything that led to George was very like circumstantial because usually when the wife is killed, it is usually the husband. So because they had no really solid concrete evidence to really keep George there, his family came and got him and Franny, and they went back to wherever they're from. Now, there is this moment in the movie where it kind of talks about the hopelessness of women, that women don't get justice. And while they're saying that, you kind of see Catherine and Ella come to Justine in her head while she is in a coma. And they're kind of holding each other much like the two women in the ring are holding each other. And then Justine wakes up and she has full memories of what happened to her. And we can tell she's gonna blow up the spot. Now she actually ends up calling George's family and letting him know that I'm awake. I know exactly what you did. So George, in a moment of panic. Now I thought George would go to the hospital and kill her. And I was really nervous. I was like, Justine, I hope you talk to the cops first before you call this fool. He actually ends up taking the boat from his cousin when it passed away, and he starts sailing in the ocean, and we actually see the ocean kind of open up to hell, and he is then, we assume, dragged down to hell. And that is very reminiscent of a painting in a book that we will be talking about in the second half of this video. But before we get into like the meat, I actually really did enjoy this movie. I don't think it was a scary movie per se, but I did enjoy it nonetheless. Again, I really like the fact that there's no jump scares. I think the story itself is very interesting. I think, again, how everything is going to connect in the second half of the video is what makes the movie even more interesting. I think that Amanda Seyfried is an amazing actress. This is an Amanda Seyfried stan account. I want her to be our generation's like Jamie Lee Curtis. Like, I want her to be our scream queen because I really feel like horror and thriller could be her genre and she could really thrive here. And I want her to be in more because I think all she's been in is like Jennifer Body in like this movie. I could be wrong, but like from things that like stick out to my memory, those are the big ones she's been in. And like I want her to be our scream queen. I want it so bad. I want it so bad. I would rate this movie like a 7.5 out of 10. Again, because I wasn't actually scared is what's stopping it from being an 8. But I did really much so enjoy it, minus not being scared. Like, I think it was a really good story. I do like the justice the women got at the end. And again, also I think it's 7 because I got to do some research and I find research super fun. So yeah. Like I mentioned earlier, this movie actually starts with a quote from a man named Emanuel Swedenborg that states, "This I can declare, things that are in heaven are more real than things that are in the real world." Sorry, I had to keep my notes up because these are words that I don't know off the top of my head, so sorry. But Emanuel Swedenborg was a pluralistic Christian theologian, scientist, and philosopher, as well as a mystic. Swedenborg is most known for his book Heaven and Hell. Before writing this book, he is stated that he was actually visited by Jesus himself and was told to basically reform Christianity. And with his teachings and his theology, that's actually garnered a audience of people, which became the new church. These people believed his revelations were the true revelations, and that this writing is what's going to get them to heaven, I guess. Again, I'm not religious, so I don't know what y'all get from it, but I assume that. This actually ties back into movie because the church and his teachings actually gained popularity around the same time that the original owners of this house, Jacob Smith and his wife, were living there. Now, I didn't talk about them in the review portion because they really are important here, but Jacob and his wife lived in this home. They built it. We actually never learn the wife's actual name because Catherine actually finds the family Bible. Now, I don't know what you guys call it. I call it family Bible, but I guess it's technically like the family tree. You know, when everyone born and dies, and Jacob Smith's wife, her name is actually X'd out and it's replaced with the word damned. So we never actually find out her name, but we do find out that Jacob was a strict Calvinist and he did not agree with his wife's, religious views, especially at that time. It was very, very, not okay to be of different religions. And she mysteriously dies, but we are to believe that Jacob killed her. And she also was the original owner of this ring. And this ring does play a huge part in the story later on. And now this house holds both of their spirits. And they will then go on to kind of attach themselves to the next homeowners of this house, which is Calvin and his wife. And we could only assume that Jacob whispered these thoughts and ideas into Calvin's mind, and that the wife was trying her best to protect Ella, but unfortunately history repeated itself and Calvin ended up killing her, trapping his soul as well as Ella's soul into the house, which they will in turn kind of protect and instigate the new homeowners, George and Catherine. So now that Catherine has died, she is now the next spirit that walks the halls of that home. And I can only assume that George will now be replacing Calvin. Mrs. Smith, Ella, and Catherine are all linked to each other by this ring that shows two women comforting each other, which does play a role into the women of this house. They all have tragic ends, but they become the new guardians of this home, and they protect the women of this home and kind of guide them to heaven. That is the role that Miss Smith had after she passed. This is the role that Ella had, and now this is the new role for Catherine. That whoever is the next occupants of this home, is her duty now to protect and guide the women of that house. So at the end of the movie, we see the end of George. He sails out on his cousin's boat. The boat then catches on fire, and then we watch hell open up. From that point, we see the camera pan out, and the scene becomes a painting. And that's a very important theme of the movie because the movie starts out with us panning into a painting, from real life into a painting, and at the end we pan out from real life back into a painting. Now, the painting we see at the end of the movie is very similar to George Enos's The Valley of the Shadow of Death. And that painting is actually on the cover of Swedenborg's book, Heaven and the World of Spirits and Hell. So everything in the story kind of leads back to Swedenborg and his teachings and his theologies. Another theme of this movie is women not getting justice, which is also very interesting that Justine's name is Justine and it's close to justice. Everyone's names I feel like have some type of like significance to it. Like the first homeowner, his name he Jacob, that's Jacob Smith. He was a Calvinist, and then the next occupant in the house was named Calvin, as well as there's a lot of art history in this movie as well, and there's like one painting where you know one of the people's names is Cole, and we have a character named Cole, and then we have Justine bringing justice to the women that have been wronged by this home. So there is a lot of symbolism, a lot of art history. Definitely, I feel like if you do watch this movie, it's very important to do research on a lot of the paintings and people mentioned because it really does bring everything together, which is why I feel like we need another 10-15 minutes to kind of like expand upon some things. I feel like I learned a lot by doing my own research, you know? Like these were things that the things talked about in this portion I didn't get from the movie. I had to do this myself. Though it was very, very fun. I feel like these bits are very interesting and very important, and I really wish they were a part of the movie because I feel like that would have elevated the movie even more. Because again, I feel like without the research, you're a little bit like confused on some parts of the movie. But it was good. It was definitely good. Definitely believe getting this knowledge is what made the movie way more enjoyable for me. Just because, again, I'm a little research nerd. So this was fun, but I do feel like we should have gotten more of this into the movie. Because I really do like the fact that the writers and the directors were able to really bring Emmanuel Swedenborg into the lore of this movie. I just wish we was given more because this is something that again I found a lot of this out through research. I didn't get this from the movie. And I feel like that's kind of a slight disservice for people watching it who aren't like me, who aren't gonna do the research. There's probably other YouTubers that have probably made videos like this section doing the research because there is so many interesting things about this movie that aren't actually in the movie, which sucks. The best parts of the movie are unfortunately not part of it, and I really wish that could be fixed. But beyond that, like I did enjoy the movie, and I did enjoy the research I got to do post movie. That's pretty much my review and analysis of this movie. Have you seen it? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Did you know about the kind of like lore behind the movie? Do you wish they expanded on it like this and added some of these elements to the movie? Definitely leave your like thoughts and opinions. If after watching this video you want to see the movie, please do. Like it actually is like a good movie for Netflix's standards. Okay, we're going by Netflix standards, not like real movie standards. It was enjoyable. It was a good time. I didn't hate it. Again, it was 2 hours and some change, and I really wasn't like checking the time because you know when you're watching a movie and you just keep checking to see how much time you got left. I really wasn't doing that. I really did enjoy it, and I enjoyed watching George go to hell because that's exactly where he belonged. So you guys are probably gonna see me in my next video on Wednesday in this exact outfit. That is because on Tuesday I am getting my second dose, my Pfizer, and I don't really know if it's gonna knock me out the way it's been doing a lot of people. So I'm probably going to film ahead for Wednesday. So if you see me just like this, don't ask no questions. Okay, just know your girl probably out for the count. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Follow me on all my social medias. And I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye, guys.